So it's been a while since I made my last video on 7 things that I learned when I started calisthenics training. Grown a little older, maybe a little bit wiser, and I've learned a lot more mistakes that I was making along the way. And this video is me sharing them with you in the hope that hopefully you won't make these same mistakes I made. Number 1 is the value of hip strength and stability. Your lower body is governed by your hips, basically. It's like your shoulders and your upper body. Imagine how strong your back and your chest can be, and even your arms, if your shoulders are very weak. Well, it's the same thing with your lower body. If your hips are very weak or tight and immobile, your lower body is not going to be very strong. It's that simple. Plus, it's going to put more stress on your knees and your lower back, as I was finding for myself. So make hip strength a priority all the time, and particularly pay attention to how you're using your hips with everything you use your legs for. Squats, lunges, even walking around, hiking. Put tension into your hips. Check out the link down below for my video on the best hip exercise that you can possibly do, and practice it at least 3 times a week to improve your hip strength, control, and mobility. Number 2, speaking of control and mobility, is back strength, control, and stability as well. I didn't put nearly enough emphasis in what is my back doing for other exercises other than just things like pull-ups. Instead, I kind of let my back do whatever during push-ups, dips, planks, squats, all these sorts of things. But what I've learned is your spine is like the universal joint of your body. And not letting your back be stable and tense compromises your spinal stability, your scapular integrity, and basically all the tension going through your entire upper body. So pay attention to how you're using your back with pretty much every exercise you do, even calf raises. Keeping your back tense, tighten up your lats, keeping your shoulders down and locked down will make a big difference in how your shoulders and your upper body perform, but also stability in the body as a whole. Number 3, learn to count. No, number 3, getting stuck on a certain exercise. This is very prominent, particularly with like combat conditioning. That labels things in steps. We have like this elevator approach where we think, okay, I'm on step 3, and I would get stuck just doing step 3, like that variation of that exercise. And the reality is calisthenics is a lot more fluid and dynamic than we think it is, and we can do things, a lot of variations of the exercise. We could do lighter versions of push-ups, bridges, squats, as warm-ups, as dynamic exercises, working on mobility, maybe drop sets. So just because you may be at a level in combat conditioning doesn't mean you only have to practice that one exercise. Feel free to experiment and use all the steps below, and also maybe even experiment with some of the steps above it, just in a little tiny bit, little ways. If you feel like you're kind of stuck, maybe try a rep of a step up above, or you can try and go with like a half step. So like if you're trying to go with from wide push-ups to narrow push-ups, go like a little bit of a semi-wide, semi-narrow push-up. And that way you're kind of transitioning between the steps. Number 4, too long workouts. I used to do workouts that would be an hour and a half, sometimes even 2 hours, filled with lots of different exercises, that worked me from every single angle. Nothing wrong with the occasional long workout, but ultimately it's gonna be a less is more kind of thing. I have a couple of basic, really good hard sets, especially if you're like trying to build muscle, and just hammer them. Don't get stuck into a lot of volume training where you're just driving yourself into the ground all the time. Shorter is better. You don't need 20 different push-up variations every single workout. I know in the last tip I said use the other exercises, but use them in almost a playful manner, experiment with them. But you don't need to, like if you're at a gym and you got like one of these pull-up bars that has a million different grips, you don't need to use all of them. You don't have to use each one. Just grab, pull, and that's your basic exercise. Get a couple of hard sets, and you're done. Let's see, 5. Loss of momentum during breaks. This is one of the reasons why I had started to adopt basically a do something every day approach, some sort of training every day, because I would sit on my butt on the couch watching Netflix maybe all weekend long, wouldn't do jack squat for 2, maybe even 3 days at a time. I'd tell myself, no, I need to recover, lots of rest, yada, yada. And then it'd be like pulling teeth to get into the next workout because I lost all this momentum. My body was stiff and tight and achy and so on. Instead, what I started to do was implement this idea of just do something every day. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be extreme. Just some sort of practice a handstand every day. Just pop up against the wall, take a few deep breaths, pop down. Even little things like that go a very long way in helping you to maintain that momentum so both mind and body don't find nearly as much friction going from one workout to the next. Working around weaknesses. This is something that I did a lot, which was not the smartest thing on my part. It's okay to do temporarily, but I did it far too long. One of the classic examples was doing pistol squats on like an elevated surface because I didn't have the hip mobility or the posterior chain strength to pull myself down into a squat so I could squat on a flat surface. That was okay for an intermediate step, but I stayed there for too long, and what ended up happening was those weaknesses became really big, and they caused all this imbalances in my leg, and I started getting knee tendonitis and so on. So don't fall for these ideas of, I can only do this exercise this particular way. I can only do pull-ups with wrist wraps on because my grip is too weak or whatnot. Use it for a short period of time, but ultimately if you're like, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z, well, get X, Y, and Z taken care of. And last, I had way too much of a stressful diet. This is more of something I had earlier on in my training career before calisthenics, but it applies across the board anyway, which is I was trying to eat, right all the time. Trying to eat so squeaky clean all the time. What it did, it caused a lot of stress on body and mind. And at first, like a lot of people, I thought, well, that's the sign of a healthy diet, right? It's supposed to be really hard. It's supposed to be something where I'm waking up and I'm fighting the good fight and everything. But what I realized over time, and now I fully believe, is that a healthy diet should remove stress from body and mind, not cause it. Be flexible in your dietary approach. Be a little flexible in your food choices, portion sizes, calorie numbers, what your food selections are. This doesn't mean go off the bandwagon and just have like a ball at the Chinese buffet every night. But if you're finding that your energy level is low, you're stressing out over food, you're stressing about not eating food, about foods that you've eaten and stuff, maybe it's time to loosen up a little bit of those dietary restrictions, because the less stressful your diet is, the more it's gonna help you recover, which is the whole point of your diet in the first place. So there you go, my mistakes that I've made through my training. Let me know if you have questions below. Be fit, live free.